Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to stare down the heart of winter, alone, only to discover that sometimes fate knocks at your door, not as a person, but as something wild and desperate? The night the blizzard came to the foothills of Wyoming, Dr. Erin Walker was already wide awake. The wind battered her log cabin, howling like something alive, rattling the window panes until she was sure the storm wanted in. It was the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you feel like the world itself is holding its breath. Erin huddled near her wood stove, stirring a mug of instant coffee, letting her mind drift. She'd come to this remote cabin for peace, but tonight, even the silence felt haunted. She was jotting down notes about snowpack levels in her field journal when it happened. At first she thought it was the wind playing tricks. But then, there, a frantic banging, sharp and raw, echoed from the front porch. Erin's heart pounded. She grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen counter. Her instincts split between caution and curiosity. Out here, visitors in a storm were rare, and almost never good news. The pounding continued, desperate, irregular. Erin slipped into her heavy parka, boots crunching on old pine planks, as she crossed the small living room. Her hand hovered over the old hunting rifle mounted by the door, but she shook her head. Whoever, whatever, was out there didn't sound like a person. Not unless they were half mad. With one breath, she flung open the door. What she saw froze her more thoroughly than any blizzard could. Collapsed against the porch rail was a white Mustang, huge, ghostly under layers of windblown snow and dirt. Blood streaked its shoulder and one flank, fur matted and glistening. Its breath came in sharp, white clouds. One wild, rolling eye fixed on Erin, full of pain and panic, then rolled back. The Mustang's legs scrabbled weakly at the boards. It made a sound, a sort of strangled snort, and then its head drooped, spent. For a moment, Erin stood paralyzed, mind racing with fear and awe. This animal was pure muscle and spirit, the kind she'd tracked from a distance but never touched. And now it was dying, right here at her door, as if some old story had come to life. Wind slammed the door into her back, shoving her to act. "It's okay. Easy. Easy," she murmured, her voice both trembling and firm. She couldn't leave the horse to freeze, and yet bringing a wild Mustang inside could be a death sentence for both of them. But as the wind howled and the snow whipped harder, Erin knew there was no choice. She reached for the emergency vet kit by the wall, then crouched near the horse's head. Up close, the Mustang stank of sweat and blood. There were old scars on its muzzle and neck, signs of barbed wire maybe, or battles fought far from here. The horse's breath came shallow and rapid. Erin gingerly ran her hand down its neck, feeling for pulse, murmuring soothing nonsense as she went. The Mustang tensed, almost bolting, but Erin kept talking, low and steady. "You made it this far, friend. We're going to get you through this." She eyed the fresh wounds, deep but not fatal, at least if treated quickly. Frostbite was the bigger danger. With gritted teeth, Erin unclipped the heavy tarp from the porch railing, fashioning it into a crude sling. It took every ounce of her strength and every trick she'd learned in the field, but she managed to drag the horse through the door into the mudroom. The Mustang thrashed weakly, hooves banging against the threshold, eyes rolling in terror. "Shh, you're safe. It's just me," Erin repeated. Even as adrenaline surged through her, the storm shrieked outside, threatening to tear the roof clean off. Inside, her heart hammered in time with the wild horse's panic. As soon as they were inside, the warmth of the stove met the cold, and clouds of steam rose from the Mustang's back. Erin stripped off her gloves and began working, cutting away ice-caked fur, cleaning wounds with iodine. Wrapping what she could in old towels, the Mustang kicked out once, almost catching her shoulder. She ducked, sweating, her hands shaking. "Don't you dare die on me now," she whispered, half to herself. She remembered the stories her grandfather used to tell, about the wild horses of the plains, about spirits who guided the lost through storms. She never believed in ghosts, but tonight she prayed for a little help from any ancestor listening. Minutes passed like hours. The Mustang fought her every step, panic surging as pain returned. Blood stained the floor. Erin improvised a saline drip with an old IV set she'd kept for emergencies, heart pounding as she prayed her hands wouldn't slip. Lightning flashed, illuminating the small cabin. And for an instant, Erin saw her own face reflected in the Mustang's eye. Exhausted, wild, alive. She laughed, a strange, hysterical sound. "Well, Spirit," she said, giving the animal a name without thinking. "Looks like we're both stubborn enough to survive this storm." She didn't know where the name came from, only that it felt right. The Mustang, Spirit, shuddered, then let out a deep, rattling sigh. Erin piled extra logs on the fire, fetched every blanket she owned, and hunkered down beside the wounded animal. Outside, the wind howled and snow drifted higher. Inside, woman and horse formed a strange alliance, two creatures battered by life and weather, thrown together by chance or fate or something older. As the hours dragged on, Erin fought exhaustion with sheer willpower. She whispered old lullabies, sang fragments of songs she'd learned as a child. When Spirit started thrashing again, she pressed her hand against the horse's trembling neck, murmuring, "Easy, girl, I've got you. We're in this together." Lightning flickered again, and the storm's fury reached its peak. Erin closed her eyes and clung to the rhythm of Spirit's breath, shallow but steady. She didn't sleep, not really. She hovered at the edge of wakefulness, caught between fear and hope, between the world outside and the strange miracle unfolding inside her cabin. By dawn, both Erin and Spirit were still alive. Barely. The storm had passed, leaving a world remade in white, silent except for the slow, steady breathing of the woman and the Mustang. Two survivors at the edge of the wild, brought together by the coldest night of the year. The storm outside had finally run out of rage, but inside the cabin, the true battle was only just beginning. Erin blinked against the thin morning light as she tried to stretch the stiffness from her limbs. Her eyes burned from exhaustion, and her hands still trembled with the lingering aftershocks of adrenaline. On the living room floor, Spirit lay unmoving except for the rise and fall of her chest, a ghostly presence among Erin's old blankets and the chaos of hastily scattered medical supplies. The cabin was warmer now, but only just. The fire crackled quietly, threatening to die out if left unattended. Erin knelt beside the Mustang, checking the bandages she'd wrapped around Spirit's wounded flank. The cloth was stained a deep, angry red, but the bleeding had mostly stopped. Still, Spirit's breath sounded ragged, and she flinched every time Erin's fingers brushed near her wounds. As Erin leaned in closer to check the mare's temperature, Spirit jolted awake, eyes wide with fear. The Mustang's muscles tensed in panic. In an instant, her powerful legs thrashed, hooves kicking out wildly. A boot-sized hoof struck the coffee table, splintering wood and sending Erin sprawling backward. The mare scrambled, nostrils flaring, her sides heaving with terror. "Whoa, whoa, easy, easy, girl," Erin gasped, scrambling to her knees, hands raised. The noise in the small room was thunderous. Spirit lurched to her feet, only to stumble and collapse again, blood from the reopened wound soaking into the blanket below her. Erin's heart leapt into her throat. She tried not to let her own panic take over, forcing her voice to stay calm. You're safe. I promise, you're safe. Nobody's going to hurt you. She moved slowly, like she was talking down a spooked child. Every inch of her body ached, but she forced herself to keep going. She remembered a trick she'd used in the field with panicked horses. Soft, rhythmic words, almost like a lullaby. Hey there, Spirit. It's just me. You're okay. You're okay. It took almost 15 minutes for Spirit to quiet again. Erin sat a few feet away, hands open, talking in gentle circles. The Mustang's breathing slowed. For the first time, Erin saw the real fear in the animal's eyes. The raw, wild terror of a creature who had never known the inside of a house, who had never depended on a human for anything but trouble. When the danger of another outburst passed, Erin risked crawling forward. The fire was nearly out, and the cabin's warmth was quickly draining away. She shoved another log into the stove, never taking her eyes off the horse. As she worked, Spirit watched her with wary suspicion. Erin made herself busy, heating more water on the stove, digging out an old canister of oats, searching her cupboards for anything a wounded Mustang might eat. She didn't have much: a few bruised apples, a sack of carrots from last fall, and a handful of sweet feed meant for emergencies. She remembered reading somewhere that a frightened animal sometimes needed the comfort of food more than anything else. With slow, careful movements, she peeled an apple and sliced it thin. The scent filled the room, and she saw Spirit's nostrils twitch. Erin scooted closer, holding out a piece of apple in her palm. At first, Spirit only stared. Then, inch by inch, she stretched her neck and, with trembling lips, took the slice from Erin's hand. Good girl. That's it. See? We're okay. Erin felt a tiny spark of hope flare inside her, warming her more than the fire ever could. But there was no time for sentiment. She needed to treat Spirit's reopened wound. The blood loss was concerning, and infection was a real threat in these conditions. Erin washed her hands in hot water, gathered her supplies, and set to work, whispering encouragement with every move. Spirit flinched and tried to jerk away, but Erin's years as a field biologist paid off. Her hands were steady, her voice soothing, her movements precise. She cleaned the gash, rewrapped the bandage, and gave the mare another dose of antibiotics from her precious emergency kit. It wasn't much, but it might be enough. Time lost all meaning as Erin worked. The storm outside faded to silence. Inside, every second was filled with small, tense negotiations. Spirit's wariness, Erin's determination, and the fragile line between survival and disaster. At some point, Erin's head began to droop. She shook herself awake, refusing to let exhaustion win. She stood and shuffled to the battered armchair by the fire, grabbing her old quilt. She wrapped it around herself, then pulled her camp chair over to sit beside Spirit. She sang softly, her voice hoarse, old cowboy lullabies, half-remembered folk songs, even the ABCs, anything to fill the silence and keep her own mind focused. Spirit's eyes would close for a few minutes, then snap open at the smallest noise: a gust of wind, the rattle of ice against the window, Erin's own cough. Each time Erin would start her song again, humming low and steady, until the Mustang's eyes drooped shut. Hours passed like this. At one point, Spirit managed to rise on trembling legs, only to nearly collapse again. Erin leapt forward, steadying the animal, feeling the immense weight of the horse pressing against her shoulder. For a heartbeat, she was sure they'd both end up crushed or trampled, but Spirit's legs somehow held. Erin fetched more blankets, draping them gently over the Mustang's shivering body. She laid out more apple slices and some carrots, coaxing Spirit to eat a little at a time. Every bite felt like a victory. As night returned and shadows filled the cabin, Erin felt her own fear creeping in. What if the wounds became infected? What if Spirit had internal injuries she couldn't see? What if the mare simply gave up? She forced herself to stay awake, drifting between reality and dream. In one hazy moment, she thought she heard her father's voice, steady and strong, reminding her that sometimes all you can do is show up, do your best, and hope it's enough. Finally, sometime past midnight, Spirit let out a deep, shuddering sigh and settled her head into Erin's lap. The gesture was so trusting, so vulnerable, that Erin nearly wept. She stroked the horse's damp mane, whispering, "It's okay, girl. You're safe. We're both safe." As the fire burned low and the world grew quiet, Erin realized they'd survived their first night together. Alone, battered, but alive. For the first time since she'd lost herself in the wilderness, Erin felt a flicker of purpose warming her from within. In the darkness, woman and horse breathed in time, survivors at the edge of hope. And somewhere, in that silent, snow-bound cabin, something began to heal. When the sun finally broke through the cloud cover, the Wyoming wilderness looked like another planet. Every pine bough was burdened with new snow, the drifts sparkling with untouched diamonds in the soft, pale light. Inside the small cabin, Erin Walker stirred from a shallow, uneasy sleep, her muscles cramped from hours spent curled on the cold floor beside Spirit. She blinked, momentarily forgetting where she was. Then the events of the last night flooded back, sharp as the mountain air. Spirit was still alive. That fact alone felt like a miracle. The Mustang lay on her side, breathing slowly, nostrils twitching as if she were still dreaming. The wounds on her shoulder and flank were dark and ugly, but the bleeding had slowed. Erin reached out, brushing her hand softly against the horse's mane. Spirit flinched, but this time she didn't try to rise or thrash. "Hey, girl," Erin whispered, her voice rough with fatigue and relief. "You made it. We made it." As the day brightened, Erin moved quietly through the cramped space. She fed logs to the stove, warming the chill from her bones and from the air around them. There was no time to indulge in fear now, only in small, purposeful actions. She brewed coffee and boiled water, then sliced up the last 2 apples in her cupboard, arranging the pieces on an old enamel plate. She returned to Spirit's side, holding out the apple slices one at a time, the Mustang's dark eyes fixed on her, wary but not wild. Erin stayed still, letting the scent drift. After a minute, Spirit stretched out her neck, lips trembling as she took a piece from Erin's palm. The rough brush of the horse's muzzle against her skin was electric, a fragile, unspoken truce. "Good girl," Erin murmured, unable to keep the smile from her lips. "That's it. Just you and me, huh?" Spirit chewed the apple, then reached for another slice. Encouraged, Erin inched closer. She wanted to check the bandages, to make sure there were no signs of infection, but she knew any sudden move might break the fragile peace. So she hummed under her breath, a gentle melody that belonged to no song in particular. She talked about the weather, about her plans for the day, about how Spirit was probably the bravest horse in Wyoming. After a while, Erin risked touching Spirit's neck. The Mustang's muscles tensed, then settled. With slow, careful hands, Erin examined the wounds, relieved to find the bleeding had stopped and the swelling wasn't worse. She replaced the bandages, murmuring encouragement the whole time. That morning, Erin opened the curtains, letting the pale sunlight spill into the room. The cabin, which had felt like a prison during the storm, now glowed with promise. Spirit raised her head, ears flicking at the unfamiliar sights and sounds. Erin could almost see the questions in her eyes. Where am I? What happens next? As the hours crept by, Erin made short, careful trips outside to bring in water and check the road. The world beyond the porch was eerily silent. No tire tracks, no distant voices, only the slow, relentless drip of melting icicles. She spotted coyote prints along the edge of the clearing, faint reminders of other survivors, living by their own rules. She hurried back inside, unwilling to leave Spirit alone for long. Every time she returned, Spirit greeted her with wary, intelligent eyes. The Mustang ate more, nibbled on oats, and accepted a few tentative sips of water from Erin's cupped hand. The trust was new, fragile, but real. At noon, Erin tried her luck with an old carrot, snapping it in half and offering the pieces. Spirit sniffed, took one, then the other, crunching quietly. Erin laughed, feeling the knot of fear in her chest start to loosen. The rest of the day passed in slow, careful rhythms. Erin worked in silence, pausing often to speak softly or hum. She cleaned Spirit's wounds, checked her temperature, and made sure the fire never went out. She swept up the shattered remains of the coffee table and rearranged her gear to make space for the Mustang. Every action, no matter how small, became part of the process of rebuilding trust, both for Spirit and for herself. By late afternoon, Spirit managed to stand. Her legs shook, and she nearly toppled, but Erin stood nearby, arms outstretched, not to restrain, but to reassure. Spirit sniffed at Erin's jacket, then took 2 uncertain steps, her hooves clattering on the wood floor. "Look at you," Erin breathed, tears stinging her eyes. "You're a fighter, aren't you?" For a moment, woman and horse regarded each other. Erin saw not just an injured animal, but a survivor, something wild, stubborn, and proud. And in that gaze, she saw a reflection of herself, battered by storms but still standing. The sun slipped lower in the sky, gilding the snow outside. Erin opened the cabin door, letting in a crisp gust of air. Spirit sniffed, ears flicking at the unfamiliar scents. Erin stayed at her side, offering calm words and gentle pats. The Mustang didn't bolt or rear. She simply stood and watched, her body tense but curious. Later, as dusk settled over the mountains, Erin sat beside Spirit and recounted the story of her own arrival in Wyoming. The heartbreak, the isolation, the slow journey back to hope. She spoke aloud, not caring if the words made sense, only that they filled the silence. Spirit listened, her dark eyes steady and unblinking. As the first stars appeared, Erin realized something profound. The loneliness that had weighed on her for months was beginning to lift. She was needed again, not just as a scientist, but as a caretaker, a friend. Spirit's presence had cracked open a door in Erin's soul that she hadn't even known was closed. That night, Spirit let Erin stroke her mane for a long, quiet moment. The trust between them, so hard won, felt like the first day of spring after a bitter winter. Erin drifted to sleep with Spirit's head resting near her knees, her heart full of cautious hope. Outside, the wind whispered secrets across the snowdrifts. Inside, 2 survivors shared the warmth of a battered cabin, and the first fragile bonds of something like family. It was the first truly quiet morning since the blizzard, a kind of hush that made Erin feel as if she'd stepped into the heart of winter itself. Pale sunlight cut through the last shreds of cloud, turning the world outside her cabin into a dazzling sea of white. For the first time in days, the air tasted less of fear and more of promise. Spirit had slept through the night, her wounds looking clean and less angry by dawn. When Erin moved quietly around the small kitchen, preparing oatmeal and coaxing the wood stove to life, she felt the weight of exhaustion and relief in every muscle. She had saved this wild Mustang, but in truth, she wondered if Spirit had saved her too. By mid-morning, Spirit stood on shaky legs near the door, her ears swiveling at every new sound. Erin watched as the horse eyed the snowy world beyond the threshold. Erin's cabin was small, just enough for one person and, for now, one recovering Mustang, but the walls were starting to feel tight for them both. Erin slipped on her parka and boots, then knelt down beside Spirit. "Want to try a little fresh air?" she asked softly, as if Spirit might answer. The Mustang sniffed her gloved hand and, with surprising trust, allowed Erin to drape a blanket gently over her back. The cold outside stung Erin's cheeks, but it was crisp and alive, full of possibility. Spirit hesitated, then followed, stepping carefully onto the hard-packed snow just off the porch. The landscape was quiet except for the soft groan of trees shedding their icy burdens. Erin led Spirit only a few yards from the cabin at first, careful not to strain her still healing body. They walked in silence, leaving a trail of uneven hoofprints and boot marks behind them. For a while, Erin just let the world fill her senses, the creak of ancient pines, the caw of a distant raven, the glitter of sun on snowdrifts. She felt the slow return of something she'd almost forgotten, a sense of wonder. As they reached the edge of a stand of aspen, Spirit suddenly paused. Her ears went forward, nostrils flaring as she tested the air. Erin followed the horse's gaze and noticed an odd bulge in a nearby snowbank, half covered by last night's wind-blown powder. Spirit stepped closer, snorting softly, then scraped at the snow with her forehoof. "Easy, girl. What's got your attention?" Erin moved in beside her, brushing snow away with gloved hands. Beneath the surface, her fingers struck something hard. Stone, not wood or ice. Curiosity piqued. Erin dug further, clearing away snow until a flat, weathered rock emerged. It was wider than her outstretched hand, its surface covered with ancient-looking marks. As the sunlight struck it just right, Erin realized they weren't cracks or scratches. They were carvings, deliberate and deep, spiraling outward from the stone's center in a series of elegant lines and geometric shapes. Spirit stood quietly by her side, far calmer than Erin would have expected, even when she ran her fingers gently over the icy grooves. Erin felt a chill. Not from the wind, but from something older, a mystery pressing close. She reached into her jacket for her phone, grateful the battery hadn't died, and snapped a few photos of the symbol. She recognized the style immediately. It was similar to rock art she'd seen in university, linked to the histories of the region's indigenous peoples. The snow muffled all sound as Erin crouched there studying the symbol. It didn't feel accidental that Spirit had brought her to it. Horses, she thought, had long memories and deeper instincts than people often realized. As she stood, Spirit pressed close, her breath steaming in the frigid air. Erin put an arm around the mare's neck, grateful for the contact, feeling something pass between them that was more than simple survival. She glanced again at the symbol, its grooves filled with shadow and sunlight. "What are you trying to tell me, girl?" They lingered there a while longer, Erin lost in thought. She recalled the stories her grandmother told her, tales of spirit animals, of omens in nature, of the old ways never truly lost. Erin's scientific training warred with her intuition, but standing in the snow with a half-wild Mustang and an ancient stone, it was impossible not to feel the pull of both worlds. Eventually, the cold drove them back inside. Erin peeled off her wet gloves, set water to boil, and downloaded the photos to her laptop. She sent an email to her old friend, Mariah Tall Elk, a leader of the local Shoshone community. Erin described the find, attached the photos, and asked if the symbol might have meaning, or if there was someone she should speak to. As she waited, Erin found herself drifting back to the stone's pattern. She sketched it in her field journal, adding notes about the location, Spirit's reaction, and her own impressions. She wrote more than she needed to, letting her curiosity lead the pen. It felt good, like waking up a part of her mind that had been asleep all winter. Spirit, meanwhile, stood by the window, staring out at the white landscape, her body finally starting to relax. Erin noticed that whenever she glanced at the mare, Spirit was watching her back, sometimes wary, sometimes almost affectionate. Late that afternoon, Erin's laptop pinged with a reply. Mariah's response was careful but intrigued. "The symbol looks familiar, maybe part of a sacred site. Please be respectful and don't disturb anything further. I'll ask our elders if they recognize it. Thank you for reaching out. Sometimes the land sends messages when we need them most." Erin smiled at the screen, feeling a sense of connection she hadn't felt in months. She made a pot of tea, carried a mug to the window, and sat beside Spirit as the sun slipped behind the mountains. Together, they watched the day fade to indigo, shadows stretching long across the untouched snow. Before bed, Erin wrote one last note in her journal. "Spirit is more than a rescue, she's a guide. I don't know what we're meant to find, but I'll follow wherever this leads." In the quiet warmth of the cabin, Spirit rested her head near Erin's feet. Erin ran her fingers through the mare's tangled mane, feeling peace settle between them, as if the Mustang had chosen her for a reason only the winter knew. Outside, the wind had died, and the symbol in the snow waited patiently, its mystery just beginning to unfold. It was the kind of night where the moon hovered low and silver above the snowscape, lending an otherworldly glow to the world outside Erin's cabin. The day's silence deepened, interrupted only by the occasional groan of settling logs or Spirit's soft movements on her blanket. Erin sat at her desk, reviewing the photos of the carved stone, replaying Mariah's email in her mind. Her thoughts churned with questions about the symbol, about the storm that had driven Spirit to her door, about what it all meant. As the hour grew late, fatigue pressed heavy on her eyelids. She closed her laptop, set aside her journal, and turned off the last lamp. The darkness felt thick and close. Spirit, who'd grown comfortable enough to rest by the stove, lifted her head when Erin lay down on the makeshift cot. For a while, Erin listened to the horse's breathing and the distant sighs of wind along the eaves, letting her mind drift. Sometime after midnight, Erin slipped into a dream so vivid that it seemed to fill the cabin. She stood outside, barefoot in the snow, but she felt no cold. All around her, the world was muted, lit by a strange, shifting light. Hoofbeats echoed in the distance, at first soft, then growing louder, a rhythm that pulsed like a heartbeat in her chest. She turned, searching for the source. Out of the drifting snow emerged Spirit, her coat glowing white beneath the moon, eyes deep and knowing. Erin reached out, but the horse slipped away, trotting toward the trees. As Erin followed, she became aware of other shapes gathering at the edge of the woods, shadows that resolved into horses, their manes tangled with wind, their bodies half lost in mist. At their center stood an old man with hair the color of snow, his face lined by both time and kindness. He wore clothing woven with patterns like those on the stone, spirals, arrows, and circles, each line pulsing with light. Erin froze, unsure if she should kneel or speak. The elder simply smiled, and when he spoke, his voice was a blend of thunder and wind, warm but commanding. "You found what the land remembers," he said, holding out a hand. "You are not here by accident, Erin Walker." Erin's name on his lips felt both strange and perfectly natural. She opened her mouth, but no words came. The elder continued, gesturing to Spirit. "This horse is not only lost, she is meant to lead. The mark you found is not just a relic. It's a sign that this place is sacred ground. Your paths have crossed for a reason, and what you heal together is meant for more than one heart." The old man's eyes glittered with both gravity and hope. "You cannot carry this journey alone. Listen to your instincts, but do not be afraid to seek help. The land speaks to those who are willing to hear, and so do its people. Open your door as you did for the Mustang. Let others in." Erin glanced at Spirit, who now stood close beside her, shoulder to shoulder. The other horses melted into the mist, their eyes never leaving Erin's. The elder raised his hand in blessing, and as he did, the world seemed to shimmer. "The storm is not the end, Erin. It is only a passage. Trust what is wild, within and without." A distant drumming rose up, a heartbeat, a chant, a memory old as the hills. It filled Erin's ears, vibrating in her bones, and she felt tears prick at her eyes. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the vision faded. The snow, the elder, the horses, all of it dissolved into darkness. Erin woke gasping, the drumming still echoing in her chest. For a moment, she thought she could see the elder's outline in the shadows by the window. But it was just the play of moonlight on the frosted glass. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, her heart racing with a mix of awe and fear. Spirit, restless, was already awake, watching Erin closely. The Mustang's breath steamed in the moonlight, her ears flicking at some sound Erin couldn't hear. Erin swung her legs to the floor, shivering, half from cold, half from the dream that still wrapped her like a second skin. She rose quietly, crossing the cabin to kneel beside Spirit. "Hey there, girl," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Did you have the same dream?" Spirit pressed her nose into Erin's hand, warm and solid. Erin stroked the horse's mane, finding comfort in the simple contact. She remembered the elder's words. "You cannot carry this journey alone. Open your door, let others in." For so long, Erin had prided herself on her independence, her ability to survive, to heal, to endure, all on her own. But the vision felt like a challenge to that story. Maybe, she thought, it was time to trust others, to seek guidance, to stop isolating herself from the people and the land she loved. She rose and crossed to her desk, where she scribbled notes in her journal, desperate not to lose any detail of the dream. She drew the elder's face, the spiraling patterns, the gathering of horses, and wrote down every word she could recall. When she finished, she found herself staring at the stone's photograph on her laptop, the carved lines suddenly alive with new meaning. The rest of the night passed in uneasy sleep, Erin waking often to check on Spirit, her mind whirring with possibilities. By dawn, she was resolved. She would reach out to Mariah and the Shoshone elders, share what she'd seen, and ask for their wisdom. She would listen to her instincts, yes, but she would also accept help. When the sun finally climbed above the pines, Erin brewed a fresh pot of coffee, her exhaustion giving way to determination. She stepped outside, the cold morning biting but invigorating. The land looked different now, charged with possibility. She spotted fresh tracks leading from the woods, a reminder that Spirit had come from somewhere, that her story was bigger than any one storm. Back inside, Spirit greeted her with a soft nicker. Erin smiled, feeling a bond that was both simple and mysterious. "Looks like we both have some listening to do, huh?" she said, scratching the Mustang's withers. After breakfast, Erin called Mariah. She hesitated only a moment before describing her dream, the elder's message, and Spirit's continued recovery. Mariah listened in silence, then promised to speak with her own elders and to visit soon. Her calm voice soothed Erin's nerves. "Sometimes the old ways speak through dreams. It sounds like you were given a gift, Erin. Don't turn your back on it." The rest of the day passed in a whirl of preparation. Erin tidied the cabin, gathered supplies, and tended Spirit's wounds with extra care. She felt the strange new energy of anticipation and hope, a sense that she and Spirit were both meant for more than survival. That night, as she sat beside the horse, Erin whispered her own promise to the land, to Spirit, to herself. "I will listen. I will follow. And I will not close my door again." The winter wind rattled the windows, but inside, the air was charged with quiet purpose, a sense that the blizzard's true lesson had only just begun. The morning after her dream, Erin awoke with a sense of purpose that had been missing for months, maybe years. The world outside her cabin was quiet, the storm's chaos replaced by a crisp, sparkling calm. Light filtered through frosted window panes, turning every surface to glass. She felt the elder's words echoing in her heart. "Listen to your instincts. Let others in." Spirit had recovered enough to stand steadily, her movements less tentative, her coat growing glossier by the day. There was a new alertness in the Mustang's eyes, a brightness that hadn't been there before, a mix of curiosity and challenge that made Erin smile. After a breakfast of oats and leftover apples, Erin bundled up, her parka zipped tight against the cold. She fastened a makeshift halter around Spirit's neck, not to restrain her, but as a sign of trust, a partnership, not a command. "You ready to show me something, girl?" she asked. Spirit snorted softly, her ears forward. They stepped outside into the untouched world, snow crunching beneath their feet and hooves. The air was sharp, every breath an invitation to wake up fully. Spirit led the way, not with the wild urgency of that first blizzard night, but with a gentle certainty. Erin let herself follow, noticing how her own fear receded with each step, replaced by curiosity and something like hope. The sky was a pale, cloudless blue as they crossed the meadow and headed into the woods. Sunlight turned every icicle to a prism. In the hush, Erin's thoughts drifted, back to childhood memories, to the old ranch her family had lost after her father's accident, to the days she'd wandered the sage and scrub, searching for signs of wild horses on the horizon. She remembered her father's hand guiding hers, teaching her to read the language of tracks, to listen for what was hidden beneath the wind. She remembered her own pain when she'd run from it all, seeking the isolation of science, of study, of control. Now, as Spirit paused to sniff a cluster of snow-bent willow, Erin felt that little girl stirring within her. "I used to think I was brave," she said, her breath forming clouds in the air. "But it's easier to run away than to stand still and face what hurts." Spirit flicked an ear, as if in agreement. They climbed a gentle rise, the trees thinning to reveal another drifted meadow. As they crested the hill, Spirit stopped and looked back at Erin, then walked with purpose toward a low outcropping of rock. At the base of the stone, partially hidden beneath snow, Erin saw another carved symbol, different from the first, but crafted in the same careful hand. This one showed two spirals joined by a single line, flanked by zigzags that might be mountains, rivers, or roads. Erin brushed the snow away, her gloved fingers tracing the grooves. The stone was colder than the air, old and silent. She snapped a photo and sat beside Spirit. letting the stillness settle. In the quiet, memories came. Her father's death, her mother's grief, her own sense of never quite belonging. She remembered her first days in Wyoming, feeling like a trespasser in a place that had no use for outsiders or for broken hearts. Spirit nudged her shoulder, warm breath against Erin's cheek. "Thanks, girl," she whispered. "I needed to see this." The Mustang's eyes held something ancient: patience, understanding, a reminder that grief did not have to last forever. They stayed at the stone until the sun was high, then followed a winding trail deeper into the trees. Erin noticed signs of other animals: deer prints, rabbit tracks, the sharp scent of fox on the breeze. She gathered wild sage and a handful of green needles from a fallen pine, remembering how her father had brewed them into tea for colds and fatigue. "You never forget the lessons you learn in the wild," she murmured. Spirit led her through narrow gullies and across a half-frozen creek, always pausing to let Erin catch up, always patient. At one point, Erin slipped on a patch of hidden ice, her knee buckling painfully. Spirit stopped immediately, turning back, her breath puffing in concern. Erin laughed, despite the pain. "You really are watching over me, aren't you?" She took a moment to rest, massaging her knee and letting herself cry, a quick, silent release she hadn't allowed in months. "I miss them," she admitted aloud, not sure if she meant her parents, her old self, or both. Spirit simply stood beside her, solid and present, sharing the moment without judgment. When they reached the next clearing, Erin was greeted by yet another stone, this one marked with a spiral surrounded by what looked like a sunburst. She took more photos, marking the location in her journal. She sketched the patterns, losing herself in the work, feeling the gentle pull of meaning just out of reach. It was late afternoon when they finally turned for home, shadows stretching long across the snow. Erin felt both exhausted and renewed. Her legs ached, her hands were numb, but her heart was lighter. She had faced the ghosts of her past, not by fighting them, but by acknowledging their presence and letting them drift away with the wind. Back at the cabin, Erin filled the stove with wood and prepared the wild sage tea, sharing a few apple slices with Spirit. She sat beside the Mustang, feeling the warmth of the fire and the horse's quiet strength. The bond between them was no longer just about survival. It was about trust, about the healing that comes from facing pain together. She wrote in her journal late into the night, describing every detail: the symbols, the stones, the moments of fear and comfort. She realized she was no longer running from her past, but honoring it, carrying its lessons with her, not as a burden, but as a gift. Before sleep, Erin leaned close to Spirit, pressing her forehead to the horse's. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing me the way, for not giving up on me." Spirit's ears flicked. She nickered softly and closed her eyes. As the moon rose over the snowy Wyoming hills, Erin drifted off, knowing she was not alone. Not anymore. Together, she and Spirit had begun a journey not just through the wild, but through memory, loss, and at last, toward the promise of peace. It started with a warning in the wind, a sharp shift that rattled the old window panes and carried a bitterness that set Erin on edge. She was slicing apples for Spirit when she noticed the pressure drop, the hush outside growing heavier. The mountains, usually so steady and eternal, seemed to retreat behind a wall of gray clouds boiling in from the north. By midday, snow had begun to fall again, thick and fast, swirling in ghostly eddies around the cabin. Erin's phone buzzed with a weather alert. Blizzard warning, travel impossible, seek shelter immediately. She read the words twice, feeling her stomach tighten. She'd survived storms before, but This one was different. Its approach sudden, its threat absolute. Spirit paced restlessly, her hooves clattering across the wooden floor, nostrils flaring at every distant rumble. Erin tried to soothe her, but the mare's agitation only grew. By the time dusk fell, visibility had dropped to zero. The world outside the windows vanished, replaced by a swirling, featureless white. Erin double-checked the emergency supplies: candles, batteries, the backup generator. She added extra wood to the stove, banking the fire for a long night. Spirit circled the room, then stopped abruptly, her legs trembling. Erin knelt beside her, feeling a wave of dread as she ran her hands over the Mustang's coat. Spirit was burning with fever. The wounds that had been healing so well now looked inflamed, angry red lines running beneath the bandages. "Hold on, girl. We'll get through this," Erin whispered, forcing herself to stay calm. But as she checked her medical kit, her heart sank. She was almost out of antibiotics, and the wild herbs she'd gathered were nowhere near enough to treat a deep infection. Spirit needed more than Erin had. Wind screamed outside, rattling the cabin's walls, as if daring Erin to act. She glanced at the dwindling supplies, the flickering lights, Spirit's labored breathing. Fear pressed in, sharp and cold. For a moment, old doubts rose, echoes of every failure, every loss. But then she remembered the elder's words from her dream. "The storm is not the end, Erin. It is only a passage. Trust what is wild, within and without." She made her decision in an instant. She would go out, no matter the risk. Somewhere in the shed beyond the barn, there was a stash of dried yarrow and willow bark, a blend her father had taught her to use for infection. She could try to reach it if she moved quickly and trusted her instincts. Bundling herself in every layer she owned, Erin checked Spirit one last time, pressing her forehead to the mare's. "You hang on for me. I'll be right back, I promise." The door fought her as she opened it, the blizzard's force nearly ripping it from its hinges. For a split second, Erin hesitated, staring into the churning chaos outside. Snow lashed her face, instantly blinding and freezing, but she gritted her teeth and pushed forward, forcing herself step by step into the whiteout. Every footfall was a battle. The wind clawed at her parka, drove ice down her collar, stung her cheeks until they were numb. She could barely see the outline of the barn, just 30 yards away, but the distance felt endless. She counted her steps, using the shadow of the fence as a guide. The snow was knee-deep, then waist-high, the drifts treacherous. She tripped, falling hard against the frozen ground, her breath stolen by the cold. For a terrifying moment, she wanted to give up. Let the storm take her. Let the world fade away. But then a vision flashed in her mind. Spirit's eyes, pleading and wild, and the memory of the elder's chant, "Trust what is wild, within and without." Gritting her teeth, Erin crawled the last few yards to the barn. She fumbled with the latch, fingers stiff and clumsy. The shed's door groaned open, admitting a blast of icy air. Inside, the world was shadow and scent, old hay, cold metal, the memory of horses long gone. Erin grabbed the stash of herbs, stuffed them into her pack, and turned back to the storm. The return journey was worse. The wind seemed to sense her weakness, battering her from every side. She lost her way twice, panic rising as the world spun in a blind white maze. She screamed Spirit's name as if the sound could anchor her, but it was swallowed instantly. Then, as she stumbled and nearly collapsed again, she felt something, an inexplicable warmth on her shoulder, a pressure that steadied her. In her mind, she heard the drumming from her dream, felt the presence of the elder, the strength of every wild horse that had ever run free. She pushed forward, step by agonizing step, until her hand found the frozen porch rail. She crashed through the door, gasping, snow-covered, half-frozen. Spirit lay where she'd left her, breathing raggedly, her head lifting in weak greeting. Erin dropped to her knees, shaking but triumphant. "I told you I'd come back. I always come back." Without wasting a moment, she set water to boil, crushed the yarrow and willow bark, and mixed a poultice, applying it gently to Spirit's wounds. She worked by the dim light of candles, her fingers barely functional, her body running on willpower alone. Spirit shuddered at the touch, but did not resist. Erin dribbled water between the mare's lips, whispered encouragement, sang every song she could remember. The wind outside reached a fever pitch, but inside hope flickered. The night stretched on endlessly. Erin fought sleep, watching over Spirit, adding wood to the fire, reapplying the herbs as needed. Every hour felt like a lifetime. Sometimes she imagined she saw the elder standing in the shadows, nodding his approval. Sometimes she spoke to her father, begging him for strength. By dawn, the worst of the blizzard had passed. The world outside was unrecognizable. Drifts piled higher than the windows. Trees bent beneath the ice. The sun a weak suggestion behind a veil of gray. Inside, Spirit was still alive, her breathing easier, her fever breaking at last. Erin slumped beside her, exhausted but victorious. She pressed her cheek to the horse's neck, tears freezing on her lashes. "We made it," she whispered. "You and me, girl. We made it." In the battered cabin, surrounded by the silence of a world reborn, Erin realized she had found a courage she never knew she had. Not the absence of fear, but the will to act in spite of it, fueled by love, memory, and the wild, unbreakable bond between a woman and a Mustang. The storms passing left behind a transformed world. For days, Erin and Spirit stayed huddled in the small cabin, recovering in the hush that follows survival. Sunlight slowly returned, filtering through windows frosted with strange, beautiful patterns, reminders of the blizzard's fury now etched in glass. Each morning, Erin checked Spirit's wounds, marveling at how quickly the infection receded under the careful mixture of yarrow and willow bark. Each evening, she watched the horse sleep, chest rising and falling in a new rhythm. Stronger, steadier, no longer the ragged pant of a creature on the brink. The thaw arrived with a soft, relentless determination. Icicles dripped from the eaves, pines shed their cloaks of ice, and the world outside the cabin door began to breathe again. One morning, as Erin stepped out onto the porch, she saw grass poking through a patch of south-facing snow, green and impossibly vibrant. The scent of wet earth and new beginnings drifted on the breeze. Even the crows returned, their raucous calls echoing from tree to tree as if announcing the season's change. Spirit, too, sensed the difference. She grew restless, her coat shedding in tufts, her steps more certain every day. By midweek, she was trotting from room to room, nosing open doors and gazing longingly through every window. Erin knew she couldn't keep the Mustang confined much longer. Spirit's body and spirit both needed open space. On the first truly warm afternoon, Erin slid open the barn doors she'd cleared of snow, letting in the sunlight and scent of new grass. Spirit stepped forward, nostrils quivering, eyes wide with wonder. Erin followed, heart pounding, holding the makeshift halter with hands both hopeful and uncertain. "Go on, girl," she whispered, unclipping the lead. "You're free." For a moment, Spirit hesitated, looking back at Erin with an expression so intelligent, so complex, that it almost broke her heart. Then, with a toss of her mane, the Mustang bolted into the clearing. She bucked, whinnied, and galloped in wild, joyful circles, each stride a declaration of survival and return. Erin laughed out loud, tears stinging her eyes as she watched. It was the sound of hope, sharp and sweet, ringing through the melted snow and empty sky. Spirit ran until she was breathless, then trotted to Erin's side, lowering her head in thanks. Erin stroked the horse's nose, overwhelmed by gratitude. "We made it," she said softly. "You and me, we made it." As the days lengthened and snow melted into roaring creeks, Erin found herself thinking about her promise, the vision, the elders' words, and the symbols in the stone. It wasn't enough just to survive, she realized. She was meant to share what she'd learned, to connect with others, to honor the land's story and her own. She started by inviting Mariah and 2 elders from the Shoshone community to visit. Erin tidied her cabin, brewed coffee, and laid out the photos and sketches she'd made of the symbols. When her neighbors arrived, they came with warm bread, herbal salve, and a quiet respect for the land and its creatures. Spirit greeted the visitors with wary curiosity, watching from a safe distance as Erin led the group to the first stone. The elders knelt, tracing the carvings with reverent hands, speaking softly in a language older than the mountains. Mariah explained that the spirals and lines were markers, symbols of journey, connection, and sacred gathering places. "This ground," one elder said, "is not just a place, it's a story. Horses are guides, messengers. Your spirit found you for a reason." The words sent shivers through Erin. She shared her dream, her fears, her sense of being chosen for something bigger than herself. The elders listened, offering wisdom without judgment. "Healing is not just for wounds," they told her. "It's for the heart, for the land, for the future." Erin's neighbors, ranchers, school teachers, a young couple from town, joined in over the next days. Some brought fence posts and tools to repair the storm's damage. Others brought books, food, and stories. For the first time since her arrival in Wyoming, Erin felt truly welcomed. Not as a stranger or a scientist, but as part of a community. She led small groups to the carved stones, telling Spirit's story and listening to others recount their own encounters with wild horses, weather, and the land's mysteries. Mariah spoke about the importance of remembering and honoring what came before and Erin found herself inspired to dig deeper into the region's history, learning not just with her mind, but with her heart. As word spread, children from the local school came to visit. Erin watched as Spirit allowed them to approach, sniffing their outstretched hands, accepting carrots and laughter with regal patience. Erin explained how Spirit had survived the storm, and how they'd both been changed by their ordeal. "This land has always been a place of second chances," she told the children. "Sometimes, when you open your door to something wild, you find out you needed saving too." With the community's help, Erin repaired the barn, cleared debris from the fields, and planned a spring celebration, a gathering to honor survival, friendship, and the start of something new. She hung photos of the stone symbols and decorated the cabin with wildflowers and pine boughs. When the day arrived, neighbors and tribe members brought music, food, and stories. Spirit trotted in circles, tail high, the star of the gathering. Laughter and song echoed across the meadow, blending with the calls of geese returning north and the quiet joy of a world made whole again. That night, as dusk fell and the last guests departed, Erin stood at the edge of the clearing, watching Spirit graze in the long shadow of the barn. She felt the weight of winter finally lift, replaced by something softer, a belonging that came not from escape, but from return. Inside, Erin wrote in her journal, "We heal in the open, Alone we survive. Together we become more. The storm was only the beginning. Spring had come to the high country, and for the first time in years, Erin Walker knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. In the weeks after the storm, Erin felt her world change in ways she had never imagined. The Wyoming landscape, once the backdrop of her loneliness, became alive with color, sound, and purpose. The snow melted faster each day, leaving behind fresh shoots of grass, fields spangled with early wildflowers, and a web of creeks sparkling in the sun. It was a landscape both wild and welcoming, shaped by the fierce cycles of winter and the gentle promises of spring. Spirit's recovery amazed everyone. The mare's coat grew sleek and glossy, her wounds fading to white scars beneath the soft fur. Erin watched as Spirit galloped across the clearing, mane flying, her movements powerful and free. Each day the Mustang returned to the barn for apples or a scratch behind the ears, but she never lost her wildness. She was a bridge between two worlds, untamable, yet profoundly bonded with the woman who had opened her door. The story of Spirit and Erin spread quickly through the valley. Neighbors dropped by to ask about the blizzard, to marvel at the horse's strength, or to share their own tales of loss and renewal. Children brought drawings of wild horses and left them tacked to Erin's door. Sometimes, elders from the Shoshone community visited to walk the land, offering quiet blessings at the stones. Each encounter wove Erin more deeply into the fabric of the place she now called home. One bright morning, Erin sat on the cabin steps with a mug of coffee, watching Spirit graze. She thought about all that had changed, how the simple act of opening her door to a battered horse had forced her to face her own fears, her grief, and her deep need for connection. She thought about the symbols in the stones, the wisdom of the elders, and the courage that comes from admitting you can't do everything alone. For years, Erin had told herself that strength meant independence. She'd braved storms, heartbreak, and isolation by retreating from the world, by proving that she could survive on her own. But as she watched Spirit nuzzle a group of visiting schoolchildren, Erin understood what true courage really meant. It was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward, despite uncertainty, despite pain, with hope and humility. Spirit, too, had faced fear. The mare had come to Erin on the edge of death, driven by a storm and the instinct to seek shelter. She'd trusted Erin enough to accept care, to endure pain, to heal. And now, as Spirit danced in the sunlight, she became more than just a survivor. She was a living symbol of second chances. Inspired by the lessons she'd learned, Erin reached out to her neighbors and the Shoshone elders to propose a new project, restoring the symbols and sharing their meaning with the wider community. She organized small work parties to clear the brush around the carved stones, careful to follow every tradition Mariah and the elders taught her. Together, they repaired fences, planted native grasses, and built a trail connecting the sacred sites. At each gathering, Erin shared the story of Spirit's rescue, how a wild Mustang's courage had reminded her of the importance of asking for help, and of respecting both the land and the wisdom of those who came before. She spoke of the blizzard, the vision of the elder, and the drumming that had called her back from the brink. She spoke, too, of her own fears, of losing her family, of never belonging, of being too broken to start again. As she spoke, Erin saw herself reflected in the faces around her. Ranchers who had lost herds, teachers who had lost faith, children afraid of being left out or left behind. In Spirit's survival, they saw proof that healing was possible, that the wildest and most wounded among them could find their place again. Over time, The story of Spirit's rescue and the ancient symbols became woven into the community's identity. The children wrote essays and painted murals. Visitors came from nearby towns to learn about the wild Mustangs, the sacred ground, and the history they'd nearly forgotten. Mariah and the elders led storytelling circles beneath the aspens, teaching old songs and the importance of honoring all life. One afternoon, a reporter from a local radio station visited to interview Erin. As she stood in the spring sunlight, Spirit grazing nearby, Erin found herself speaking with newfound confidence. "We're all connected," she said into the microphone. "People, animals, land, history. None of us can survive alone. True courage isn't pretending we don't need anyone. It's reaching out when we're lost and opening our doors to the wild, outside and within." The story aired across the state, and Erin received dozens of letters from strangers, some thanking her, some sharing their own stories of rescue and renewal. For each one, she wrote back, signing her letters, "From the edge of the wild, where hope finds its way home." As spring ripened into summer, the symbols on the stones gleamed under a warming sun. The trails Erin had helped clear became paths for walkers, riders, and children. Each time Erin led a group to the stones, Spirit walked with them, sometimes leading, sometimes simply standing watch as people traced the carvings with curious hands. Erin realized, as she watched the community gather around the old stones and the wild Mustang, that they had all learned something vital. Courage is a shared endeavor. The land's story and their own were deeply entwined, each loss and each victory shaping who they were becoming. At night, as she sat on the porch, Erin sometimes heard the distant thunder of hooves, Spirit running free with a small band of wild horses who visited from the hills. She knew that Spirit's time with her might not last forever, that wildness could never be truly tamed. But she no longer feared that loss. Instead, she welcomed it as part of the gift, the lesson the Mustang had given to her and to everyone willing to listen. And in the hush between dusk and dark, Erin Walker understood that her life, like Spirit's, was forever marked by courage, connection, and the wild, enduring hope that comes from opening your door when the world needs you most. There are moments in life that divide everything into before and after, moments that turn pain into purpose and isolation into belonging. For Erin Walker, the blizzard that brought Spirit to her door was such a moment. But as spring tipped into summer, Erin realized her real legacy was just beginning. The idea for the sanctuary grew out of quiet evenings on the porch, watching Spirit graze under the wide Wyoming sky. The wild Mustang had become more than a survivor. She was a beacon, drawing neighbors, school children, and tribal elders alike. Her story inspired questions. How many other wounded horses roamed these mountains, unseen and unloved? What if there was a place for them, a safe haven not just for animals, but for people seeking a second chance? Erin first shared the idea with Mariah and the Shoshone elders over a pot of wild sage tea. She spoke of Spirit's journey and the healing that had come from listening, from honoring both pain and hope. "We could build something together," she said, "a refuge that honors your ancestors in the land, where wild and wounded horses can recover, and where people can learn what it means to belong." Mariah smiled. "You have opened your door, Erin. Now open your arms. Let's make this a place where healing is not just for the horses, but for everyone." Plans moved quickly. The valley was alive with energy, neighbors eager to pitch in. The old barn was rebuilt, its walls painted with murals of wild horses and ancient symbols. Fences were repaired, not to confine, but to protect and guide. Word spread, and volunteers arrived, some to mend roofs and dig post holes, others to cook meals and teach children about native plants and the meaning behind the stones. The Shoshone elders led a blessing at the sanctuary's opening, inviting ancestors and spirits to watch over all who came seeking refuge. They planted sage and sweetgrass at the entrance and shared stories of the land's first people, whose wisdom was now woven into every path and paddock. Spirit became the heart of the sanctuary. Sometimes she led new arrivals, a battered bay stallion, a band of skittish fillies, into the safety of the fields. Sometimes she simply grazed with her head high, eyes half closed in the sun, reminding everyone that wildness could coexist with peace. The children who visited learned to approach her quietly, letting Spirit decide if she would accept an apple or a gentle touch. Erin discovered a new rhythm to her days. Mornings spent mucking stalls and tending wounds, afternoons leading nature walks and answering questions. At night, she wrote long letters to friends and strangers alike, describing the work of the sanctuary and sharing stories of hope restored. The emails and messages she received in return became a second community, spreading Spirit's lesson across the state and beyond. School groups arrived to tour the land, listen to the elders, and paint rocks with their own symbols. Erin watched with pride as shy, troubled kids opened up around the horses, learning patience, empathy, and the quiet power of presence. Some returned with their families, helping build new paddocks or plant windbreaks of willow and cottonwood. The sanctuary's walls became covered with children's art, horses racing across bright skies, spirals and suns, handprints layered one atop the other like a promise. As summer ripened, Erin began speaking at community events and schools. Her voice, once hesitant, grew steady as she told Spirit's story. The blizzard night, the ancient symbols, the dreams and guidance that had changed everything. She explained how courage wasn't just surviving alone, but embracing the help of others, honoring the wisdom of the past, and opening your heart to what's wild and unknown. Hope and healing come, she told each audience, when we open our doors to the wild, outside and within. When we trust that our broken places can become the source of our greatest gifts. The sanctuary grew. A website was launched, sharing stories and photos of each rescued horse, each community celebration, each ancient stone restored. Donations arrived, some small, some astonishingly generous. Erin partnered with local vets and rescue organizations, ensuring that any wild or wounded horse in the region could find shelter and care. On the first anniversary of Spirit's arrival, Erin hosted a gathering beneath the cottonwoods. The community came together with food, music, and stories, everyone pitching in to decorate the barn with garlands of wildflowers and prayer flags. Mariah's voice carried over the crowd as she spoke a blessing, honoring the old ways and the new hopes forged by Erin's vision. As dusk fell, Erin led Spirit to the circle of stones at the heart of the sanctuary. Children and elders gathered around as she retold the tale, how a blizzard brought them together, how they both survived, how the lessons of the land had changed them forever. Erin looked around at the faces illuminated by lanterns and firelight, neighbors, friends, once strangers now united by a shared journey. She realized she was no longer a woman set apart, but a part of something larger and more lasting. The boundaries between human and horse, between the old pain and new joy, had blurred into a single living story. She ended her speech with a message she'd come to believe with all her heart. Every wild thing deserves a second chance. Every wound can heal if we let others help. Let this sanctuary be a place where courage, kindness, and the wisdom of the land live on. And if this story moved you, like and subscribe for more stories of courage, mystery, and wild renewal. Tell your friends, bring your children, and keep your own doors open. You never know what gift might be waiting on the other side. as applause and laughter echoed into the night. Erin leaned her head against Spirit's strong neck. The horse's breath was steady, her eyes half closed in peace. Erin felt the years of loneliness slip away, replaced by gratitude. For the blizzard, for the stone, for the wild, untamable heart that had changed everything. Above them, the sky was alive with stars, and below, in the warm light of the sanctuary, hope found new life, growing, healing, and ready for whatever stories tomorrow would bring.